It's now Alvin Bragg who could decide Trump's future, which may have a big impact on other people's lives. It's Alvin Bragg who has the most formal authority and likely influence on whether Donald Trump goes ahead to be tried or convicted or sees his effort to get back in the White House completely upended, or even possibly, if he were to be convicted, he is legally presumed innocent. It is Alvin Bragg who would be exercising power to put Donald Trump under perhaps house arrest or formal imprisonment. So understanding this DA is important right now. And understanding how we can go from something that many people thought was impossible, indicting a former president when they were wrong, to inevitable, to now reality. Understanding all that means understanding Mr. Bragg. And turns out there are a few things about him that we think, we go through the evidence, the receipts around here, that we think can deepen your understanding. And then, of course, you make up your own mind with these facts about where we're headed and what you think. So here's one. This DA, Alvin Bragg, before he took the job, has a history with Trump himself, and it involves beating Trump in court. So Bragg spent most of his legal career behind the scenes. So he was working not the way he is now, where you see him at the lectern. Given the press conference, he was working for the person at the lectern a few years back for New York's elected attorney general when he led a civil suit against alleged abuse of nonprofit laws by Trump and people involved in his so-called foundation. I say so-called, it was dissolved over this case. And this was about 6 years ago. So Bragg was leading the case basically as an attorney employee of the Attorney General's office, probing into how paintings and artwork and golf tournaments were all being swept under the supposed fraudulent banner of Trump charitable activities and foundation activities, and Bragg and the AG won. They got this fake foundation shut down and dissolved. And that's not all. Bragg argued at the time that it was necessary for local law enforcement to step up and be the backstop. That's his word, the backstop, if the federal government doesn't do what he viewed as the necessary things. He said, quote, we have to step up and push back and step into the void. Now, that's not just a random quote we picked for you in the special report. Think about it. That is the view now DA Bragg clearly still holds today. Now, under precedent, feds usually do go first when there's competing claims or two trials. But Bragg was saying very clearly, if the feds don't act at all, if they just leave a void, others must act. It's the theory of his new case against Trump, because it is true that federal prosecutors would have the stronger legal footing to enforce alleged schemes and plots related to lying to people and alleged fraud in a federal election. That's the 2016 election, the sort of tabloid Watergate, as I've called it in this case. But Bragg saw that the Southern District of New York, those feds, were standing down. He saw that decision did not change when Merrick Garland took over the DOJ, and he decided if there was going to be uncharged crimes, then New York would step into, as he put it, the void. Now, some prosecutors also try to say as little as possible, but that's not a law. That's kind of a style or a norm. But Bragg, before coming into this office and in it, as I'm going to show you, has been quite open, citing his experience in beating Trump in that foundation case and other past examples where he took on politicians, whatever party. He talked about this when he was running for this job. He even touted it in a Beat interview as a candidate.
I'm a public corruption prosecutor, prosecuted the majority leader of the state Senate. I prosecuted 2 mayors, one for bribery, one for campaign finance fraud. And at the Attorney General's office, I led the team that held Trump and his children accountable for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation. So I go where the facts go.
Bragg implying that he just follows the facts, but others sometimes do not, or they get scared of tough cases. He sued Harvey Weinstein and his company over hostile work environment violations. He did something rarely seen by veterans of law enforcement, particularly those with any election ambitions, which was he sided against some police officers by suing those who killed Eric Garner. Bragg represented the family. And he wrote about this after the DOJ announced there were no charges, saying that it was time to reform laws on excessive force. And he said the whole situation had become another failure to pursue a criminal charge for the police killing of an unarmed African-American man. And that's not just any voice. That's the voice of someone who was then going to run in our system, in New York, like many places, DAs have to run. They're accountable to voters, although they're not supposed to be partisan. So they need to run, and they need to have good relationships with police. And that case wasn't just about police brutality and race. It was also about what it means to be independent in public service. Do you have true independence and not a partisan or team or tribal mindset that a certain group can do no wrong, which is the kind of corruption that keeps corrupt cops or politicians in office? This is someone who was publicly saying you have to have a higher standard for that, for the DAs who work with police, that there's a higher public duty. Bragg arguing the blatant cover-up showed a deeper corruption that he said back then troubled him.
Yeah, I can't think of a case that's been more emotionally significant to me as a lawyer. The fact that we sit here, 7 years after Mr. Garner was killed and don't know basic facts, that's an embarrassment. All New Yorkers should be embarrassed by that. And some people have said, how can you run for district attorney and sue the city? And I was like, that's the whole point.
The whole point, he said, was being able to want to serve in the city, but not being afraid of challenging the city and its elites and its leadership and its powerful police department, which does a lot of good. There's a lot of people in New York who will tell you about what NYPD does that's positive to keep safety, but it doesn't mean everyone there is perfect, certainly not above the law. The whole point to him, and the reason why I'm getting into this tonight, is that he not only said, but acted on the idea that criminal justice needs leadership that holds others accountable for crime and doesn't stand down just because the crime is suddenly by the powerful or an ally of the DA or a police officer even. I mention this tonight because it's something we've actually reported on many times right here on this program. If you even put, say, the politicians and police to the side and think about, say, doctors, it'd be understandable that doctors might feel protective if they get allegations made against a fellow doctor or a nurse, that's their instinct. But doctors who have very serious higher calling to protect life, and that's what police and DAs are supposed to have, they make life and death decisions for the government. So if doctors find out that other doctors or nurses are murdering people in the ER, well, obviously the right reaction would be to stop it immediately and not cover it up. But as Bragg accurately referenced, the evidence has shown in some of these cases, including Mr. Garner's, that other officers and people in law enforcement cover up the underlying killing and its evidence. So that's how this all goes full circle. Not do you talk about independence or bringing cases when it's easy. What do you do when it's hard? What do you do when there's pressure? What do you do when bringing a case might make people say you should never get a big job again? That was on the line. And even while Bragg was campaigning for this DA spot, he then participated in a rare judicial inquiry involving that Garner case. So he was showing he could do more than one thing at a time. So those were the signs that Bragg would stick to those positions. New York is a place where DAs are expected, really like a lot of places, to be very allied with and, quote, loyal to the police no matter what. So that, in his election and in his public persona, was something he just had to navigate, but he didn't back down off it. Now, in the Trump case, if some people were surprised that Bragg moved first with all these open probes, D.C., Georgia, they may not have been paying a lot of attention to, again, his actual work, because he came into office with that independence. He refused to be pressed by some of the early holdovers who wanted a speedy Trump indictment, and some of them left, Mr. Pomerantz and others. We've reported on that. But then Bragg just continued to methodically work the case up the line. I mentioned that he beat Trump on the foundation case. Then he beat the Trump organization on the business side, convicting it, and convicting Trump's CFO, who got sent off to Rikers. And I know we live in a kind of a media heroin environment where everybody needs a bigger and bigger fix, but it is a huge deal to convict the entire company and the CFO. It may not have played as big after 5, 6+ years of everyone getting tired of all of this, but it's a big deal. In fact, we were covering it at the time as a big deal in December, even though there was no sign that it was going to lead to indicting Trump. We covered those convictions, and that's when the DA, then Bragg had become DA, returned to the beat. This was in December. Why does it not lead to charging Donald Trump himself?
So, as I said back in April in a statement, the investigation's ongoing. This is one chapter. I cautioned people against reading ahead. We needed to focus on this and do what I thought the
public servants in my office, the superb job they did in the courtroom. That was the focus. But as I said, the investigation's ongoing.
So now Bragg is on offense because the Republicans in Congress are trying to interfere with this while he's facing threats. We've reported on powder showing up at his office that people are sending allied with Trump. He's suing Republican Congressman Jordan for interference. It's an aggressive move. Politico explaining it's a strategy that goes years back, developed by Bragg and his colleagues in that same New York Attorney General's office that I mentioned, where they try to deal with federal subpoenas by invoking state sovereignty. A prosecutor intent on defending the independence of local probes, including, in this case, meddling by congressional Republicans. So you take it together, and from the NYPD history to challenging corruption in New York to making precedent in the area of presidential indictments, Bragg is not someone who backs down, and he's clearly not someone who takes everything that's ever come before, which lawyers call precedent, and treats it as a ceiling or a boundary. And I will tell you, if you go into a courtroom, you need to work with precedent. That's how the judges enforce a lot of the rules, and you got to know most of it. But it doesn't mean that 100% of the time you can only ever do things that came before. Obviously, that would be a kind of extreme type of caution. But you'll meet some prosecutors, especially when it comes to the powerful or the cases they don't want to take, and they'll just cite precedent. And maybe it's just precedent, or maybe they're afraid to deal with the problems in our country, which is why those problems seem to get a pass. See how it's almost circular? And now America's just met one of the only prosecutors who's not afraid to make new law, new precedent, and go up against these assorted powers, including the ones I mentioned in his history. And from here, we're all just going to buckle up and find out what happens if you have the receipts and the evidence and you're willing to make new precedent.